This is Mission Control, Houston. 7 days, 22 hours, 29 minutes into the flight of Integrity on the Artemis II mission. We're about 3 hours away from Integrity reaching the halfway mark between the Moon and the Earth following its flyby of the lunar surface. Integrity systems in excellent shape. The crew currently in a conference with Flight Director Rick Henfling to review entry and splashdown procedures and elements of their flight data file, along with the rest of the flight plan for the remainder of the mission. Next up in major activity will be the brief firing of reaction control system thrusters 5 hours and 48 minutes from now in the RTC-2 burn. That's the return trajectory correction number 2 burn. That will further fine-tune the path of Integrity as it begins to approach the Earth's atmosphere that it will reach tomorrow afternoon for its entry back to Earth, a high-speed entry that we'll get into with more particulars here in a minute. The crew tomorrow on entry day will wake up
Mission
at
Control,
10:35 a.m. Central Time to begin their final day in
Capcom
space.
Jackie Mahaffey here in Mission Control.
They'll
and Reid Weisman
begin
aboard,
to configure
Integrity
the crew cabin
regarding
the
all of the
stowage of items
ship's
that they
toilet,
no longer will need.
and a
They have
discussion
already
of
begun that
how to manage bio
task.
breaks
This is
between now and the end of the
basically
mission
today.
tomorrow night. Everything is in good shape on
They'll
board
be
Integrity.
configuring
No issues
the
for the
cabin
crew,
for entry
no
and
impact to the
preparing
mission.
their
We'll hear
launch and
much
entry
more
suits.
about all of this in our
There
mission
is
status
another
briefing coming up in
return
just 4
trajectory
minutes
correction
at the
burn
bottom
that
of
is
the hour
scheduled at
1:53
p.m. Central Time
p.m.
on Friday.
Eastern Time. This is Mission Control, Houston.
That's the final big burn that will clean up and tweak any further trajectory maneuvers to make sure that Integrity is moving in the correct orientation with the right angle of attack as it enters the corridor, a cone if you will, across the Pacific Ocean for arrival at the splashdown site off the coast of San Diego. Broadcasting 24/7 on the YouTube channel. Continuous coverage all the way through the time the crew is on the recovery ship tomorrow evening. NASA Plus coverage will join in simulcasting all of this at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday afternoon and evening. At 6:15 p.m. Central Time on Friday, we'll hand over communications links from the Deep Space Network to the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. Just 18 minutes later, at 6:33 p.m. Central Time on Friday, the crew module will separate from the European service module. And just 4 minutes later, at 6:37 p.m. Central Time, the crew module thrusters will fire for about 18 seconds to nudge the aft end of the vehicle upward, basically reorienting the vehicle for the most favorable angle of attack as it enters the Earth's atmosphere. In rapid-fire succession at that point, at 6:53 p.m. Central Time, the vehicle and its 4 astronauts will enter the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet, traveling 34,882 feet per second. Range to touchdown, 1,701 nautical miles. Now, just 24 seconds after entry interface, heat will begin to build up around the vehicle, raising the temperature around the vehicle to about 4,000 to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we will enter about a 6-minute blackout period at 6:53 and 54 seconds p.m. Central Time. This is expected. It is not unusual. We will have a loss of data and a loss of voice from the crew for about a 6-minute period because of the ionization, the plasma buildup around the vehicle as the heat shield repels the heat from the velocity of entry. During that blackout period and the period of peak heating, the G-forces on the crew will build to about 3.9 Gs, which is well within the limits planned for this mission. Integrity will conduct 2 roll reversals, one to the left, one to the right during this period of time, actually the first pair of 5 such roll reversals that will be commanded by computer to bleed off excess speed as the vehicle descends into the thicker regions, the denser regions of the Earth's atmosphere. We will emerge from that blackout period at 6:59 and 56 seconds p.m. Central Time. And the blackout period ending should result in a resumption of communications with the crew. We'll be calling them to make sure that they can hear us, and we'll be waiting for their response. And at that point, we'll be just 7 minutes away from splashdown. The chute deployment sequence will occur in several stages. There are a total of 11 parachutes for Orion to slow its speed from a peak velocity of about 32 times the speed of sound to a splashdown velocity of just 19 miles an hour in a 14-minute period. So it's a pretty quick deceleration that will be felt by the crew on board Integrity. First up will be the deployment of 3 forward bay cover parachutes to pull the forward bay cover. That's essentially the top cover on the vehicle that must be pulled away. Vehicle that must be pulled away from the rest of Integrity to ensure the deployment of the rest of the parachute system. So 3 forward bay cover parachutes will be deployed at 7:03 and 22 seconds p.m. Central Time. Each one of these chutes is 7 feet in diameter, weighing about 8 pounds apiece, 100% Kevlar. Those chutes are deployed at an altitude of about 24,000 feet when the vehicle is traveling at about 350 miles an hour. That'll be followed in quick succession by the deployment of 2 drogue chutes, and you'll hear all of this in real time. 2 drogue chutes will be deployed to stabilize the crew module during descent, establishing the proper conditions for the main parachute deployment that will follow imminently. The drogue chutes will deploy at 7:03 and 23 seconds p.m. Central Time, while the vehicle is traveling now just 473 feet per second. So you can see how quickly the descent rate will decelerate, and we'll be calling out altitude and rate of descent all the way through Integrity's transit across the Pacific Ocean. The main chute deployment following 3 pilot parachutes that are used to lift and deploy the main parachutes from the crew module forward bay. That's followed finally by main parachute deploy. That's the key thing we're looking for. These 3 large parachutes that will deploy at 7:04 and 44 seconds p.m. Central Time at an altitude of about 5,400 feet above the ocean. And at this point, Integrity will be traveling just 198 feet per second. The main parachutes, the 3 large orange and white parachutes that you'll be seeing, are 116 feet in diameter. They weigh 310 pounds apiece. Each parachute is about 265 feet long. You'll see them reef in that typical manner that you see parachute deployments for a spacecraft that is landing on land in the case of Russian Soyuz vehicles, or in the case of Dragons landing in the Gulf or off the coast of California. So 11 parachutes will be employed during the descent of Integrity for its splashdown, and the current time that we have from Flight Dynamics for splashdown on Friday night is 7:07 and 6 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:07 and 6 seconds p.m. Pacific Time, which is about 2.5 hours before sunset out in the Pacific. Once Integrity splashes down in the Pacific, Navy helicopters and fast boats will be deployed to arrive by the capsule as quickly as possible. Here in Mission Control, we'll be first conducting the power down of the electrical systems and ensuring that no toxic gases are emanating from Integrity. The one thing, of course, we'll be looking for at splashdown is the orientation of the vehicle. If it's stable 1, we'll know, and that means it is upright. If it's stable 2, it will be upside down, but the system known as CMOOS by its acronym, the Crew Module Uprighting System, which consists of 5 large inflatable airbags at the top of the spacecraft, will be inflated nonetheless, whether it's stable 1 or stable 2, through helium that will maintain a stable upright orientation for Integrity to allow the start of the recovery operations. It is anticipated that it will take about 45 minutes to an hour to extract the crew from the vehicle. The extraction process, led by Navy divers and flight surgeons, will have Cristine Koch exiting the vehicle first, followed by Victor Glover, followed by Jeremy Hansen,
hey, Jeremy, we
and the commander, Reid Weisman, will be last off the ship.
Batteries into D or
Once
E-locker,
in the
we are
large inflatable raft that will be erected and buttressed up alongside the spacecraft, it's called the front porch. The crew will make sure that they are getting their Earth legs back after 9 days of weightlessness, and one by one they'll be fitted with harnesses to hoist them up to 2 hovering Navy helicopters. Cristine Koch will be first up into helicopter number 1, followed by Jeremy Hansen into helicopter number 2. Victor Glover is third up, in helicopter number 1. He will join Cristine Koch, and Reid Weisman will be last, going up into helicopter 2 to join Jeremy Hansen for a short flight back to the deck of the USS John Murtha, which is the recovery ship. Once the crew is on board, they'll be taken into the medical bay for more comprehensive medical exams, and will spend some time aboard the ship before they're helicoptered off the ship back to San Diego, and ultimately to board a NASA plane to fly back to the Johnson Space Center. So that, once again, is a rundown of all of the key times that we have at this point. Any updates, of course, we'll bring them along to you. But the crew currently in the midst of a review of entry and splashdown procedures with the entry team here in Mission Control. They'll be moving into a midday meal a short time from now. And once again, the next major event is going to be the return trajectory correction burn number 2 that is on tap for this evening, with the burn scheduled at 9:53 p.m. Central Time tonight, an 8-second firing of the reaction control system jets to tweak and fine-tune the path of integrity back to Earth. About 2 hours and 45 minutes from now, the vehicle will pass the midway point of the return trip home from the moon that saw a fly around to the moon and human eyes casting a gaze and capturing historic photos of areas of the moon never seen before. So we will continue our nonstop coverage of the flight of Integrity on the Artemis II mission, all the way through the point that the crew will be in the medical bay on the ship tomorrow evening. Once again, splashdown is scheduled off the coast of San Diego at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time on Friday evening.
Houston Integrity, we are back up on 1 after the conference.
We've got you loud and clear.
And we're on board Integrity with our 4 astronauts, Cristine Koch on the left, Victor Glover, Commander Reid Weisman, and Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency on the right. The crew is continuing to stow equipment on board. They've concluded a conference with entry flight director Rick Henfling to review procedures for tomorrow's return to Earth. And we'll soon be moving into a midday meal on this day before their homecoming to planet Earth. Integrity systems functioning very well. No issues being worked by the flight control team. No issues that would preclude a nominal entry and splashdown for the crew on Friday. One more note, I think of interest, of course, is the heat shield on Integrity and how it likely will fare during the high-speed return to Earth for Integrity's astronauts on Friday.
Assume it is meant to stay there.
I went through this a bit earlier today, but I think it's worth repeating. On Artemis 1, we flew a trajectory known as a skip entry, which means we performed an initial dip into the Earth's atmosphere to dissipate some energy to basically bleed off excess speed. Then we lofted or skipped out of the atmosphere, then dipped a second and final time into the atmosphere before splashing down in the eastern Pacific Ocean south of San Diego. As part of routine post-flight inspections and video analysis, there were some areas of mechanical char liberation that were observed, which created a cause for concern for a critical part of that spacecraft. It should be noted
Jeremy, speaking of
that the
9,
chemical decomposition
that
of
would be
ablative
a
heat
great
shields
place
like
for those used
the one on
AGA batteries.
Orion is expected. That mechanical liberation of the char is what was unexpected on Artemis 1. The chemical decomposition occurs as the heat shield material heats up and decomposes, a process known as pyralization, which generates gas during entry. The generation rate of gas is a function of the temperature of the heat shield material known as avcoat. As those gases are being generated, a layer of char is forming on the surface of the heat shield, and the char is porous. Now, ideally, what you want to have happen is for the gas to escape through the pores in the char layer faster than new gas is generated. On Artemis 1, however, we found that the temperature profile experienced by the heat shield was such that this was not happening on areas of the heat shield with less porous avcoat. That resulted in a pressure buildup under the surface of the char layer, and when the pressure got high enough, portions of the char layer liberated from the heat shield. As a result of the post-flight analysis, and by the way, it should be mentioned that by all estimation and all analysis, had a crew been aboard Artemis 1, it would have been safe for them to return. However, this was an off-nominal occurrence. As a result, NASA gathered experts from across the agency and private industry, including establishing an independent review team to investigate that issue. All agreed with one conclusion. For Artemis II, it was agreed to fly a shorter entry trajectory, in other words, a shorter amount of time from entry interface to a splashdown site, to avoid a temperature buildup or a temperature profile conducive to higher rates of gas generation as the avcoat chemically decomposes. Now, for Artemis 3 and beyond, we're going to redesign that manufacturing process to make the avcoat blocks such that we will have material that starts out more porous, allowing more efficient gas dissipation as that char layer forms, which will be a critical feature for longer skip entry trajectories returning from the south pole of the moon, which of course is our destination for lunar landings at the outset. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a wider view of the Artemis Flight Control Room, known as the White Flight Control Room, here in Mission Control at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Down the hall from here, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room that you see in your view, work is continuing as the work day for the Expedition 74 crew has wrapped up. They are, in fact, preparing for the launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on Saturday morning. That launch scheduled at 6:41 a.m. Central Time, 7:41 a.m. Eastern Time, to send a Northrop Grumman Cygnus cargo craft to the International Space Station packed with food, fuel, supplies, and scientific experiments. NASA Plus coverage of that launch will begin on Saturday morning at 6:20 a.m. Central Time, and again the launch 6:41 a.m. Central, 7:41 a.m. Eastern Time. A launch on Saturday, weather permitting, will result in a robotic capture of the Cygnus craft, which is named the SS Steve Nagel after the late former astronaut. That mechanical capture by the robotic arm under the operation of Jack Hathaway of NASA, backed up by Chris Williams, is scheduled for Monday at 11:50 a.m. Central Time, 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Monday, with our coverage beginning at 11 a.m. Central Time, high noon Eastern Time on Monday. The Cygnus spacecraft from Northrop Grumman will be installed onto the common berthing mechanism on the Earth-facing side of the Unity module for its delivery run to the Expedition 74 crew. So there's activity in both rooms. The segue from Artemis's return to Earth to resumption of space station operations. The resumption, not actually an accurate word, because the space station operates 24/7, 365. But the focus of attention will shift from Artemis to a certain extent to the active operations aboard the International Space Station. We're about 2.5 hours away from reaching the halfway point on Integrity's journey back to Earth from the moon. And, of course, with splashdown looming on the horizon, all of that activity will unfold in rapid-fire succession tomorrow afternoon and evening, culminating with a splashdown off the coast of San Diego for Integrity and its 4 astronauts at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Eastern Time. At a mission elapsed time of 7 days, 23 hours into the flight of Integrity, this is Mission Control Houston. And back aboard Integrity, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen in the middle of your screen, Christina Koch on the right, Reid Weisman in the background, the crew continuing to stow equipment and get Integrity's cabin ship-shape for tomorrow's return to Earth. Victor Glover just right there on the left side of your screen.
Houston Integrity, stowage, low priority.
Christina, go for stowage.
The keyboard is stowed per the return packing plan. It was deployed.
Copy.
And Jackie, while I have you, we just wanted to express even more our gratitude for these awesome, I'll call them drink notes and drink messages. So many people wrote really heartfelt messages on our bonus drinks, and we are just smiling ear to ear every time we look at one. So thank you so much. It was really fun to find these, and they're really giving us a boost for entry day.
We will make sure that message gets heard by everyone who needs to hear it. Thank you.
This is Mission Control Houston, here in the flight control room. A welcome visitor, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, the Artemis launch director who kicked off this mission with the flawless launch of the Space Launch System and the 4 Integrity astronauts back on April 1st. She's here visiting at the Johnson Space Center, currently talking to her ascent flight director, Judd Freeling, and the entry flight director, Rick Henfling, who will be on tomorrow to preside over Integrity's return to Earth.
Houston, we are NOM ops on board. NOM ops on board. Give us a call.